Avoidance feels like relief in the moment, but it quietly grows the anxiety that we're trying to escape. Sometimes the things that we avoid the most are the very things that's keeping us anxious, overwhelmed, and stuck. Avoidance is lying to you, and it feels safe in the meantime, but it is secretly feeding your fear and destroying your peace. The more you avoid a hard conversation, a task, a decision, or a truth, the louder your anxiety becomes. If you've ever wondered why you're stuck in the same patterns, the answer might be in one word: avoidance. Let me explain. Welcome, everybody, to the Ease Your Mind podcast. My name is Christina Adrian. I'm a licensed mental health counselor, licensed professional counselor, and I help you break free from anxiety, fear, and shame by teaching you powerful tools rooted in scripture and psychology, healing minds, restoring faith, and renewing purpose. Mostly everybody, I would say, struggles with some level of anxiety and avoidance. There is a level of anxiety and nervousness that's normal. You have a job interview coming up, you're going to feel a little nervous and anxious. Sometimes might even question about showing up, depending on how high the level of anxiety that you have. If you have a first date, first time in class, first time in mostly anything would bring about some level of anxiety because we don't know what to expect. And one of the root causes, or I should say one of the factors in anxiety, is a fear of the unknown. I would say that's one of many factors. So if there's a fear of not knowing what to expect, not knowing what the outcome is going to be, there's some level of anxiety that's going to come into play. One type of anxiety that I struggle with myself is social anxiety. Growing up, talking to people was very hard. I was very quiet, timid, and shy. Now, as an adult and as a therapist, now I can see and know that I was struggling with social anxiety, but as a child, I didn't know that that's what it was. I just knew that I was shy and timid, and I knew that talking to people scared me. Now, why did talking to people scare me? That's a long story. I'll share a little bit today. But I did deal with a lot of bullying when I was a child. When I was as pretty much as early as I can remember, I had struggles with people, whether it was at school, whether it was at church, and even with family. So people never really felt very safe to me. And there was always a criticism that comes with the way people interacted that made me feel rejected. It made me feel not accepted. It made me feel like I just couldn't and wouldn't fit in. Now, if you know anything about social anxiety, the root cause of social anxiety is actually a fear of criticism. That's what causes you to want to avoid social situations because you're afraid of people criticizing you, maybe making harsh descriptions of you, seeing you in a harsh way. So then it feels safer to just stay away. Whenever we're feeling anxious about anything, it always seems like it feels safer to just stay away because in the immediate sense, it does give us relief. If I'm feeling anxious about going to a social event, if I don't go, I feel better for that moment. But what we end up doing is we're increasing the anxiety that we feel about social events. So the next time you have a social event to go to, you will feel even more anxious because what happened is you trained your brain to be fearful of social events. Now, this can go for anything, but I'm just going to use social events as an example here, but you could think of whatever fear it is that you have. What's blocking your inner peace? Are you not sure why you feel stuck, overwhelmed, or disconnected? Do you have thoughts constantly running through your mind and ruminating and causing a lot of anxiety? Are you lacking peace in your mind, emotions, not understanding who you are, and struggling to understand the purpose in your life and who God called you to be? I created a quiz to help reveal the root cause, to understand what it is that needs to be dealt with. Is it coming from the mind and the way you're thinking? Is it coming from your heart and your emotions? Is it a soul issue or is it a spirit issue? This can help you to understand exactly where you need to begin your healing journey. Click the link below to take the quiz to start to see where your healing journey needs to begin. Now back to the show. It could be sometimes a phobia, like a fear of bugs, a fear of flying, a fear of heights, or it could be certain type of level of anxiety when it comes to talking to people. It could be an anxiety when it comes to day-to-day life, which is more like of a generalized anxiety of different day-to-day things that you're just constantly worrying about. Most likely there's something there that you're probably avoiding that needs to be dealt with. But when you avoid the situation, you're training the brain to continue believing that this is a fear situation that you should avoid. So then what ends up happening is even though you get that relief in the immediacy when you decide not to go to that social event or you decide to not go on that plane, your brain wires that fear even deeper. So then the next time you might have to go on a plane, the next time you might have a social event to go to, or the next job interview you might have, the anxiety is actually ticked up a lot higher than before. We don't realize that, but the anxiety is actually intensifying because the brain knows that if I make you anxious, you will avoid this thing that you told us you should be afraid of. So the mind thinks that it's protecting you. It thinks that it's protecting you because of the fact that you trained it to say that this is something to be feared. And so it increases the anxiety to cause you to get afraid even more, feel that anxiousness, and not go. When you don't go, the brain thinks, okay, mission accomplished. We've stopped you from doing this thing that is fearful, because our brain is designed to keep us alive and to help us to survive. But the thing is, the brain fears something that actually does not need to be feared. Bugs, I mean, I don't know. That's a whole nother conversation. But technically, there are a lot of things. If it's not going to kill you, it shouldn't necessarily be feared. But that might be up for debate. Going on a plane, that also might be another one that people say is up for a debate. But however, flying on a plane, statistically speaking, is safer than driving. But many people who are afraid of flying have no problem going into a car. But statistically speaking, driving in a car should be actually more feared. We train our brains to be afraid of certain things. And because it's trained to be afraid of those things, then the brain is like, okay, so we're going to keep you from said things. But the fear is imaginary because there is no threat. The reason why we were created with a fear mechanism in our bodies, because fear does have a place. There is a reason for fear. I believe that God created us with a fear mechanism in our mind and our body, because without fear, when we see a bear, when we see a lion, we wouldn't know what to do. But because of the fear mechanism in our mind and our brain, when we see a bear, when we see a lion, because we know that it's lethal, that they can harm us terribly, even kill us, our mind goes into fight and flight mode. So sometimes even freeze. Now, freeze is not always good. Well, actually, no, because I want to say with black bears, I think there are certain types of creatures, they say staying frozen is actually the best way to make sure that they don't harm you and to make sure that they leave. Then there are some creatures you might run into, it's probably best to run. And maybe there might be a few where you can fight. But however, without that mechanism in us, we wouldn't know to do that. So that's one of the reasons why we have that in us. But see, those are actual real threats. What ends up happening is that gets translated into other things that we've trained our brains to think are a threat, but they're really not. Is talking to people really a threat? No, yes, you might get criticized. You might get made fun of. You might get rejected, but you'll be okay. And this is one of the things that is hard for us to believe when we're dealing with anxiety, is that you will be okay. That even if people reject you, even if people don't accept you, that does not have to define who you are as a person. And that's one of the reasons why it also becomes very difficult for us to deal with these anxious moments. Because when we do get rejected or we do not feel accepted, we personalize it and allow that to say that means I'm not good enough or I'm not worthy. That's why these people didn't accept me. And it's like, no, that doesn't define who you are. You are still a worthy person. They just didn't like you for whatever reasons they didn't like you. But it doesn't have to say anything about who you are. Because one, sometimes people don't like you for stupid reasons. Two, sometimes you have to ask ourselves the question, the people who I'm trying to be liked by, do I want to be liked by them? Because sometimes we are gaining the approval of people who do not even live the lives that we want to live. They're not very inspirational. There's nothing to really look up to. There's not really much there. But because maybe society say that these are the cool people, that these are the people you should be like, we then covet and want to be like them. But we never sit and ask ourselves the question, but why? So when they reject us, it feels so deep and personal, and we allow it to attack who we are as a person. But who and what they think you are has nothing to do with who and what you really are. When we feel strong in ourselves and feel confident in ourselves, it's much easier for us to deal with the rejection. But in order to be able to deal with rejection, we have to be willing to not avoid it and allow ourselves to confront it, because that is the best and maybe even the only way to get through our fears, is by confronting it and allowing ourselves to be courageous. 2 Timothy chapter 1 verse 7 said, the Lord does not give us the spirit of fear, but a love, power, and a sound mind. So here it's telling us where fear comes from, that it is a spirit, and it's not a spirit that comes from God, because God gives us love, power, and a sound mind. So those are the three things that fear takes away from us. It takes away our power, it takes away our sound mind, and it takes away our love. It takes away our sound mind because I'm sure you all have experienced, and I know when I'm feeling very fearful, I do not have a peace of mind. When I'm feeling a lot of fear, I'm ruminating on whatever I'm afraid about. I'm distracted thinking about whatever I'm afraid about, that I can't even think about anything else that I need to think about and focus on. And it brings all this uneasy feeling and anxiousness that is now starting to affect your body. So you don't have a sound mind, you don't have peace of mind, because that's pretty much what sound mind means, having peace in your mind. Your mind is all over the place. Your mind is racing because you don't have that peace because of whatever it is that you're afraid of. It takes away your power because when you feel fearful about something, you feel stuck. You feel stuck. You can't move forward. And that's not power. Whenever you have real power, there is a level of control, autonomy, and a forward motion when it comes to power. Power is an energy that moves. Fear keeps us stuck. And it takes away our love because whenever we are feeling fearful, we become very self-focused. When it comes to social anxiety, there is something what is called the spotlight syndrome. When we are struggling with social anxiety, we think that everybody sees us, like there's a spotlight on us and everybody's going to criticize us. But the fact is, that's not going to happen. Most people are not really paying attention to you. And that was one of the things that I had to learn. And this is one of the things that I heard often from many people. It took me a while to really ingest it and really believe it, but then I started realizing that it's true the more I talk to people. Because most of the time when you go to social events, everybody else is in their head too. They're also worried about how they're coming off. They're also worried about whether or not they're going to get accepted or rejected or fit in, or if they're going to get criticized. And because they're so much in their head, they're not really thinking about you. Therefore, that spotlight that you think that you're in is really an illusion. It's best to try to challenge that and realize that, let me just be myself. Everybody else is in their head anyway. So what it is that I fear that is going to happen is most likely not going to happen. And the reason why I mentioned about being in the spotlights, because when you are in the spotlight, the reason why I say and believe that it takes away your love is because love cares about the other person. How can you think about the other person if you're constantly just focusing on you? You can't even love yourself properly when you're in that spotlight sense, because you're hiding away your true self because you're worried about how you're going to present to others. So now you're transforming yourself to be like others rather than being your authentic self. And with someone who is grounded and rooted in love for themselves would not do that. When you are secure in who you are, you're going to be yourself, not transform yourself to fit in with whoever it is that you're around. And this is one of the reasons why I believe that I want to say it's 1 John chapter 4 verse 8 that says perfect love casts out fear. Because when you truly have love for yourself and love for other people, it will take away the fear that you have of doing whatever it might be that a lot of times it probably can help you or help somebody else. So the Bible tells us that fear is a spirit and it can take away our love, power, and a sound mind. And many times in the Bible, the antidote usually for fear, it's not like as if God just says, get rid of it, stop it. You know, he says, take courage, have courage. When God was speaking to Joshua right before they went to the Battle of Jericho, and this comes up, at least I think I read 3, 4, or 5 times in the book of Joshua, where God said to take courage. And God is telling them, I'm paraphrasing, God is telling them, I will be with you, take courage. Now, the thing is, there would be no reason for courage if there was no fear. So that tells me that God knows that they are going to be afraid and that what they're going to come up against will cause them fear. But he tells them to take courage, because courage is what helps also to drive out fear. Because in order to do what it is that you are fearful of, you have to have this boldness come in you. And this is one of the things that I believe that the Holy Spirit comes to do. It comes to empowering us and embolden us so that we will not be fearful. And fear can also be contagious. In Deuteronomy chapter 20, I think it's Deuteronomy chapter 20, verse 8. This was an instruction that was given by the Lord to the people of Israel. It says the officer shall continue to address the troops. So they were getting ready for war. And it says that when he addressed the troops, saying, "Is anyone afraid or disheartened? He should go back to his house, or he might cause the heart of his comrades to melt like his own." So here, the Bible also shows us how fear can be contagious. If you're feeling disheartened, if you're feeling afraid, you're saying, go home, you shouldn't be in the war because you might cause others to be afraid too. And we see this many times in everyday life. How many times you want to do something and you might feel courage, but if the person right next to you is speaking a lot of fear and negativity, what ends up happening? You start to pick it up too. Now you're starting to get afraid. Now you start to question, should I do this? Can I do this? And this is one of the reasons why who you have around you is very important when it comes to your growth. Because if you surround yourself around people who are filled with fear and are procrastinating in life, then you're probably going to do the same. But when you surround yourself around people who are willing to challenge their fear, to take up their courage, to be ambitious, to try new things, that will also be contagious. And many times you will find yourself doing the same because the people around us does affect us whether we realize it or not. So one of the things that I want to talk about also when it comes to avoidance is how it perpetuates negative patterns in our life. One of the therapies that I utilize a lot in my practice is called schema therapy. Schema therapy was created by a psychologist named Jeffrey Young. The reason why I like schema therapy so much is because that it helps get to the root cause of why we're thinking the way we're thinking, why we behave the way we behave, and what's affecting us in our relationship with ourselves, the world, and other people. And that's pretty much what schema is. A schema is a pattern that gets created in your childhood and through traumatic experiences that affects the way you see the world, yourself, and other people. And when it comes to schemas, there are three behaviors that perpetuates these patterns. One is avoidance, surrendering to the belief, and overcompensation. So avoidance is obviously the one that I'm talking about the most here today. Avoidance is always caused by some level of fear. So fear is always going to keep us away from whatever it is that we think is a threat. And whenever we fear something is going to happen, our mind and our body says we should avoid it. But however, avoidance will make the anxiety worse. And it will keep you from doing things that you probably really would enjoy and probably really need to do in life in order to fulfill your purpose in life. Because in order to fulfill your purpose in life, you're going to have to do new things. And fear of the unknown is one of many things that keeps people stuck. And one of the main things that causes a lot of anxiety. But however, in order to invent new things, do new things, discover new things, people had to be willing to deal with the unknown because you're not going to know what the outcomes are. And if you want to control the outcome, that's also going to create more anxiety because you just cannot. You are not God. You cannot control the outcome, nor should you try. Because when you live in that level of control, you're going to actually put yourself in a prison and not really even realize it. And in order to break free from fear, exposure is one of the best ways to do so. So when you do go to therapy, especially if you're struggling with social anxiety or some type of phobia, exposure therapy is usually one of the most common forms of therapy that will be used. So exposure therapy is pretty much where the therapist will help guide you slowly, little by little, to expose yourself to whatever it is that you're afraid of. Now, it is best to do this with a professional help because there are some ways that you do this that might actually work against you if you do not do it the correct way. Because you don't want to just throw yourself out there and just expose yourself to whatever it is that you're afraid of, like off the bat. Now, some people might do that. Maybe it might help. Everybody's different. But usually you would scale it from 1 to 10. 10 being the most anxiety producing, maybe almost close to a level of a panic attack, and 0 being no anxiety at all. And then you will want to start somewhere in the middle. Because if you start with something that's at a 10 and almost going to cause you a panic attack, it's not going to be helpful. It's not going to be helpful because you haven't learned the skills to get through that high level of anxiety. You haven't learned the skills to maybe even bring down your panic attack or to change the mindset from those high level of emotions that you really want to make sure that you do all the steps properly so that you can expose yourself well and start shifting your mindset from seeing this as a situation to be feared and knowing that this is a situation to not be feared, that you'll be okay. And that even if said thing does happen. So let's say you do go to the social event and you do end up dealing with somebody who criticizes you, reject you. Another goal is to know that it's going to be okay, that it doesn't have to define you. It doesn't have to break you, and that you can continue talking to other people. And eventually you will find your people. You will find the people who will accept you, who will not reject you, and it will help you to feel more welcome. So you want to expose yourself to that because as you expose yourself to the things that you're afraid of, and talking yourself through it, what you're doing is you're retraining your brain to realize, oh, we don't need to be afraid of this. Okay, this is not a real threat. Okay, we can actually handle this situation. We do not have to run away. This is what you start training your brain when you start to expose it to the things that you are afraid of. Because unless you do that, it is going to perpetuate the cycle and the patterns. Let me give you an example. Abandonment is a very common schema that many people deal with. Many people have the fear of abandonment and a fear of people leaving them. So the way avoidance will look here is that if I'm afraid of people abandoning me, then I'm just going to avoid close, intimate relationships. So when you avoid close, intimate relationships, you might still talk to people, you might still get to know people, but there's a wall up. You might be unknowingly pushing the person away and not realize it because you want to avoid this level of closeness because of your fear of abandonment. But because you have this wall up and you're pushing the person away, the person might actually leave. So then that reinstates the belief to you, like, see, everybody's going to abandon me, everybody's going to leave. But what you didn't realize was it was your fear of abandonment that pushed the person away that then caused them to leave. The behavior is causing whatever it is that you feared to happen, or what we call a self-fulfilling prophecy, where if you didn't have such a huge fear about it, you probably wouldn't have behaved in that way. You probably would have been more maybe willing to be vulnerable, to be open, to pretty much do the things that you need to do in order to have a good, close relationship. You would have been more willing to do that, which may have helped the relationship create a deeper connection where that person perhaps may not have left you. Now, some people might say, no, I have been vulnerable with people. I have opened up and they still have left. And when they left, it hurt so deep. That's why I don't want to open up anymore. Now, don't get me wrong. I totally understand why sometimes people do not want to open up, why they don't want to go deep, why do they don't want to connect, and that fear of abandonment that can strengthen. So I understand why there is that need to have the guard up when it comes to people. However, in order to have true, meaningful connection with others, we have to take that risk. Now, that risk can come with so much joy, so much connection, peace, and intimacy with others that I think many times it is worth it, especially if you want love, especially if you want connection. And we are social creatures. This idea that we are meant to be alone is a lie. We are not meant to be alone. Human beings do not thrive alone. Human beings go insane when they're alone. There's been enough studies that have shown in prisons that when you put people in solitary confinement, they actually grow more insane because human beings were not made to be alone. When God created human beings, he said that it is not good for man to be alone. And God knew what he was talking about. Statistics also show, too, how much better people do when they work together. Actually, everything in this world was created because people work together. If nobody worked together, this wouldn't have happened. Even God himself with the Tower of Babel, he caused everybody to have different languages because he knew that if everybody could work together, what such great things that human beings can do. Statistics also show, too, that married men are more likely to make more money, to be more successful, and to be more happy. Even though there's a lie in the world that would tell men that it's better to be single and you'll be happier when you're single, that's just a flat out lie. Men do better when they are married. And not only that, the Bible tells you get extra favor from the Lord when you're married, and treat your wife well. That's also another key. The Bible does say that a man who finds a wife finds a good thing and finds favor with the Lord. We were not created to be alone. We were created to be with other people. So when it comes to that fear of abandonment, it may seem like being alone is the best option, but however, it is going to leave you depleted and lonely and disconnected, which is not emotionally and mentally healthy for anybody. So we do have to take that risk of being vulnerable. But once again, this goes back to the other thing that I said is that not only do we have to train our mind to know that this is not a threat, sometimes the thing that we are fearful of might actually happen. We might get abandoned. We might get rejected. So then the second thing, though, is also training your brain that you will be okay. That even if this person leaves, this does not have to define you. You will be okay, and that you can make and form other and greater friendships. Avoidance never really helps anybody. Think about maybe areas in your life that you're avoiding. What decisions or tasks that you need to get done that you haven't gotten done? There are many people who have dreams and big ideas and things that they want to accomplish, but they're avoiding it because they're afraid. Most of the time, procrastination is caused by fear of success, fear of failure, or sometimes overwhelm. So when there's a fear of success, sometimes people are afraid of success because they're like, what if this actually does work and then I have more responsibility? Can I handle it? Sometimes there's a fear of failure. What if I fail? And most importantly, I think when people are afraid of failing, they're afraid of people seeing them fail. What if people laugh at me? What if people see that I make a mistake? What if people, once again, we are always fearful of what people might say and think about us. And so therefore, we don't want to take that chance because we're afraid we're going to fail and people are going to see. Or sometimes procrastination is done because we're overwhelmed. Many times we have a lot of things that we need to do and we need to learn how to break it down. Depending on which of the three that you're dealing with depends on how you're going to handle it. Now, if it's the fear of success or fear of failure, a lot of times it could be the same approach because it's all about how do you handle that fear? How do you push through that fear and know what is that fear telling you, which is most likely a lie. What lie is the fear telling you, and how do you shift your mindset and belief to something that is more beneficial and also something that is more true? Because like I said, most of the time what the fear is telling you are lies. Because making mistakes is okay. That's how we learn. We learn through mistakes, but somewhere in society we've started believing this lie that mistakes are not good. But every single invention in the entire history of the world, the people had to go through mistakes in order to get to where they got to. I am 1,000% sure that the Wright brothers, the first plane that they created, did not fly successfully. I'm sure it probably crashed and burned. It had many malfunctions and problems. But what happens is you can go back now to figure out what needs to be changed, what needs to be fixed in order to get to what it is that you need to get to. But however, if you don't have the first prototype, so to speak, you're never going to figure it out. I actually saw this image of the laptop, and look at the old laptop. The old laptop is big and clunky, and now we have laptops that's very slim, slender, easy to carry, and much better to carry. But however, without that first laptop, what we have now would have never been created, because we would have never known what needs to be changed. We would have never known what needs to be improved upon. When you make mistakes, that's how you know what needs to be improved upon. Most of the time, we're waiting for things to be perfect, but it's never going to be perfect. And you don't get information by just thinking about it. You get more information and clarity through action. The more you move, the more you will know what it is that you need to do. So this is one of the reasons why when it comes to many different inventions in the world, that it was once the person started taking the next step, they started realizing, oh, this needs to change, that needs to change. Because going back to my illustration with the plane, how would the Wright brothers know what needs to change in order to make this plane fly successfully if they'd never even started building it to begin with? And you have to start to build it to begin with, because this is something new. This is something you've never done. So there's no way you can there's no way you can think of the final product and a perfect product in your mind and think you're going to execute it exactly the way that it is in your mind. And somehow it's going to do this thing that you've never done before. That somehow this business is going to be exactly successful and run exactly the way that you expect it to be, when it's something you've never done before. But many times we hold ourselves back and we procrastinate because we are so afraid. We're afraid to take that step. We're afraid to look a certain way to other people. But it's like, who cares? Who cares what people thinks about you? Now, you might hear that and say, well, that's easy for you to say. No, not really. Because if you remember in the beginning, I struggled with social anxiety. And social anxiety is a fear of criticism. So I used to very much so care about what people say. And when you care about what people say, you end up also falling into people pleasing. And you want to please people. You want to do things to fit in. You want to do things to make sure people are not upset. But then eventually, through my journey in my faith, because I would say it's my faith that helped heal my social anxiety, because I didn't really get healed through traditional therapy. Now, obviously, I don't have anything against therapy, and I have gone to therapy and do go to therapy. But honestly, I give all credit to God, because it was God who helped heal my anxiety way before I even started going to therapy, because I didn't start going to therapy until much later on in life. And when he healed my anxiety, he started showing me how to not put so much emphasis on what people think about me. So pretty much I shift from fear of man to fear of God. God is who I fear and who I strive to fear, not people. Because like I said, who cares what people think? Most people that we are so fearful of what they think are not even living the life that we want. And that was one of the things I started to say to myself. Because a lot of times everybody around me has certain things to say, but I'm like, you're not even living the way that I want to live. You don't have the same you're not something that I aspire to. So why is it that I'm taking or putting so much weight into what it is that you say and how you critique me? And there's a quote, there's something that Alex Hormozy is an entrepreneur who I love to watch. He is very inspirational for me. And he often say that people who are fit don't make fun of people who are going to the gym trying to get fit. People who are successful don't make fun of people who are still at the bottom working to be successful. It is always the people who's not doing anything, who always has something negative to say about what it is that you are doing. But so once again, it's like, so why do you care? Why do you care about what a bunch of people who are doing nothing have to say about what you are doing? Because they're just probably upset because you have the boldness to take the step and do the thing that they couldn't do. You are reminding them of their failures. You are reminding them about how they have not had the courage to do what it is that they wanted to do. So instead of maybe being inspired by you to do the same, they instead want to pull you down. Because like they say, misery loves company. But however, and this is one of the reasons why we need to ignore what those people have to say and look for those people who are willing to pull us up. Because the people who are fit are usually the ones that's willing to pull up the person who's overweight trying to work out. Find those people. Find the people who are willing to root for you, who knows what it's like to get from that place of being overweight to being fit, that place of thinking that they're going to fail, nothing's going to work, to success. Find those people, because those people will help you pull through your fear and have courage to do what it is, whatever it is that you're afraid of. And that's one of the things that I learned reading the Word of God. I think one of the reasons why God doesn't condemn us when it comes to our mistakes is because He wants us to learn from it. If He condemns us for our mistakes all the time, it will make us feel shame. And God knows that shame will destroy our confidence. It will destroy our self-esteem, and it will destroy our love. And God is a God. God is love. So He doesn't want to take that away from us. And He knows that we have to learn through mistakes. He knows that we are but dust. So He knows that we're going to make mistakes, and He wants us to learn from it. He doesn't want us to feel condemned and feel worthless because of our mistakes. But however, He will discipline you, and He will use that to show you, hey, this is the right way. And He does it in such a loving way because He is a good Father. And He does it in a way to help you to see and feel convicted, but however, not to feel shameful. And many times people will cause us to feel shameful about our mistakes instead of feeling convicted and confident that we could get back up again and do something good the next time. And this is another reason why when you're trying to face your fears, who you have around you is very important. Because if you're around a bunch of people who are giving into their fears and going to keep avoiding, it's going to be hard for you to do the same. You have to find people who are willing to fill themselves with courage so that you can have that courage too. Because the same way fear is contagious, courage can be contagious as well. And not only that, that's the job of the Holy Spirit. The Holy Spirit empowers us and emboldens us so that we can do the things that the Lord called us to do. When the Lord calls us to our purpose, when He calls us onto this adventure, as Jordan Peterson says that I love the most, it's like, it is an adventure. When the Lord calls you to fulfill your purpose, it feels like an adventure because you don't know exactly where you're going to go. And if you really lean into it, it could be really fun. If I'm being honest, it can be really fun to just figure out where's the Lord going to take me. Because the thing is, if you trust the Lord, then you know that He's not going to take you to a bad place. And because I know He's not going to take me to a bad place, I just trust Him and go along and say, hey, what's the next thing that we're doing today? What's on the plan for today, God? What's on the list? And it feels like a fun adventure rather than a dreadful thing to be feared. And when you take on that adventure, when you are willing to do the things that God called you to do, there's going to be some fear that comes out. There's going to be some nervousness because you don't know the end. You don't know the outcome. However, if you allow yourself to just be curious and go through the process, there's so much that the Lord can do with you that if you feed more of your fear, it's going to keep you from. Many people are not fulfilling what they truly can fulfill in life because of fear. Many people are stuck because of fear. Many people have so many great things that's inside of them that they can pour out and give to the world and do for the world, but they don't because of fear. So fear is an enemy. Fear should be looked at as an enemy. We shouldn't embrace it and just take it as just a normal human emotion. Because yes, there is a level of fear, like I said, that is normal. But most of the time we are fearful of things that's not actually a fatal threat. So it's important for us to go through our fears and understand our fears so that the patterns doesn't perpetuate and continue. So avoidance is one of the main things that keeps us in these negative patterns and loops in our lives. So even in relationships, the reason why you're falling in the same bad relationships is because there's something you're probably avoiding. There's a truth that you're not willing to face. And that's when a lot of times we might be avoiding what's going on within. There might be an emotion going on, a hurt, a pain, a trauma, something mentally, emotionally that we need to deal with that we haven't because it's so hard to deal with. But because you're avoiding dealing with that trauma and pain, it's keeping you in a perpetual cycle of falling into one toxic relationship after the next. So ask yourself the question, what are the things that I'm avoiding in life that's holding me back? That's holding me back emotionally, that's holding me back mentally, that's holding me back from living out the purpose that God has for my life, that's holding me back in a way that I feel no peace, I do not have a sound mind, I feel like I have no power, I feel like I can't move forward, I feel like I have no autonomy. Most likely the enemy that's coming after you is called fear. And the enemy loves to use fear against us because he knows that if he could put fear in us, then it can stop us. The Bible tells us to take courage, pray to the Lord, ask him for courage, search for courage, seek courage. The Holy Spirit is what can fill you with courage. And if you need help with this, I do have a simple thought journal that you can find at the link below so that you can write out your thoughts, emotions, behaviors, because when you look at those 3 areas of your life, you start to notice what is it that you're avoiding? What thoughts are you avoiding that you haven't dealt with? What emotions are you avoiding that you haven't dealt with? And then when you start to write down the behaviors will show you the avoidance, because you might start to realize after you write down your thoughts and emotions, something made me feel maybe very afraid or maybe feel uncomfortable. I went and took a nap. A nap, many times, is one way that we avoid things. Now, a nap doesn't seem unhealthy, but if you're doing it to avoid things, then it is becoming an unhealthy coping skill. So our behaviors can also show us what is it that we are doing to avoid whatever it is that we need to face. So we can look at that behavior and say, oh, okay, so this is what I need to change. This is what I need to challenge myself in. So if you click the link below, you can download the journal so you could get into the habit of starting to process your thoughts, emotions, and behaviors so that you can start to face the fears that's holding you back. So if you like this content and it was helpful for you, like, subscribe, and share with someone that you think it could help. And also leave a comment below. Are you struggling with fear? Do you struggle with avoiding things? Are you noticing the patterns in your life and starting to see like, okay, yeah, I can start to see how avoiding these things are actually perpetuating the cycles instead of helping me to break free? I would love to hear what you think. Like, subscribe, share, and until next time, take care.